Commander Lee Daeho felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes upon him as he stepped into the grand assembly of Nexus Prime. The crystalline chamber soared above him like a cathedral built for gods, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with each alien speaker's words. The air itself hummed with translation energy, converting dozens of languages into something his human brain could process. His boots echoed against the polished floor as he approached the central speaking platform. Each step felt like walking toward Judgment Day. Behind him, 3 other humans followed. Dr. Park Min-soo, the xenobiologist who had spent her life studying alien cultures. Captain Ru Hyanwoo, Earth's finest military strategist, and Ambassador Song Nari, whose diplomatic skills had gotten them this far. The delegates arranged themselves in concentric circles around the platform, each species claiming their traditional positions. The towering Zephyrians perched on elevated platforms, their bird-like heads crowned with ceremonial feathers that sparkled like metal. Their black eyes reflected no warmth as they studied the human delegation. Below them, the insectoid Vexani clicked their mandibles in what Lee hoped was curiosity rather than hunger. To his left, the ethereal Minduri floated in containment fields, their translucent bodies barely visible except for the swirling galaxies of thought patterns that danced within their forms. They had no need for vocal cords. Their communications bypassed speech entirely, touching minds directly. Lee suppressed a shiver. He had experienced their mental contact once before and found it deeply unsettling. The aquatic thalassans occupied massive water-filled spheres, their tentacled forms undulating gracefully as they watched the proceedings. Bioluminescent patches along their bodies flashed in complex patterns, their own form of silent commentary. Even they, despite being one of the more peaceful species, regarded humans with obvious skepticism. High Chancellor Morthok dominated the chamber from his elevated throne, carved from a single piece of volcanic glass. Though the reptilian leader stood nearly 12 feet tall, his scales shifting from deep green to gold as his mood changed. Ancient scars crisscrossed his hide, reminders of battles fought long before humans had even discovered fire. His eyes, each the size of Lee's fist, fixed on the human commander with calculating intelligence. Terrence Morthok's voice boomed through the chamber without need for translation. The Chancellor had learned human languages decades ago, considering it beneath his dignity to rely on mechanical interpretation, to stand before the collective wisdom of 847 species. Civilizations that have spanned galaxies while your kind was still dwelling in caves. Lee felt Park Min-soo tense beside him. She had dedicated her career to proving humanity's worth among the stars, documenting every achievement, every breakthrough that showed humans could contribute to galactic society. Her research files contained evidence of human innovations in medicine, engineering, and theoretical physics that had impressed even the most advanced species. "We come not as supplicants, Chancellor," Lee replied, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "We come as equals, seeking partnership. In the great work of galactic civilization." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the alien assembly. The Vexanese clicking intensified, while several Zephyrian delegates preened their feathers in what Lee recognized as their equivalent of laughter. Morthok's scales shifted toward a deeper gold, a sign of growing irritation. "Equals your species has existed in space for barely 2 centuries. The youngest member of this council has civilizations spanning 50,000 years. You build with metal and fire, while we shape matter at the quantum level. Your minds are chaos, driven by chemical impulses and evolutionary baggage." The Chancellor gestured toward a holographic display that materialized in the chamber's center. Images flickered past: human wars, environmental destruction, social conflicts.
Ow.
Your history is written in blood and suffering.
Oh.
Even now, your homeworld struggles with basic resource management and social cohesion. You fight among yourselves, over invisible lines on maps, while we unite star systems under common purpose. Captain Ru's hand moved unconsciously toward his sidearm before he caught himself. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. Several alien delegates leaned forward, their interest suddenly sharpened. "You see," Morthok continued, "even in this sacred chamber, Your warrior's instincts emerge. You're driven by base emotions, anger, fear, pride. These are the tools of primitives, not the foundations of galactic citizenship. Ambassador Song stepped forward smoothly. Chancellor, if I may address the Council's concerns, yes, humanity is young compared to your ancient civilizations. But our youth brings fresh perspectives, new approaches to old problems. Our emotional nature, which you see as weakness, drives us to achieve the impossible. It was human determination that mapped the Kepler void when your own scouts declared it impassable. A lucky accident dismissed one of the Mindariot's thoughts, rippling through the chamber like cold water, random chance, not skill. Dr. Parkman Sue finally spoke, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Honored delegates, I have spent 15 years studying your cultures, your achievements. I have profound respect for what you have built. But I have also observed something troubling. Your ancient wisdom has become rigid. Your perfect societies have grown ... stagnant. A dangerous silence fell over the chamber. Lee felt the temperature. It seemed to drop several degrees as hundreds of alien minds focused on the human scientist. When did any of you last face a true challenge? Park continued, undaunted. When did you last adapt, evolve, push beyond your comfortable boundaries? We humans may be chaotic, but that chaos drives innovation. It makes us survivors. Hi, Chancellor. Morthok rose from his throne, his full height casting long shadows across the platform. Survivors, yes. Survival is not civilization. A virus survives. A parasite survives. The question before this council is whether humanity deserves to stand among the builders of tomorrow or remain observer to our achievements. The formal vote began, species by species declaring their positions. The Zephyrians voted against, citing humanity's unpredictable nature. The Vexani rejected the petition based on insufficient evolutionary development. The Mindari found human thoughts too discordant for productive collaboration. One by one, the rejections mounted. Some delegates offered flowery language about humanity's potential and future prospects. But the message was clear. Humans were too young, too primitive, too dangerous for full membership in galactic society. Finally, only one delegate had yet to speak. The shadows of the upper gallery, a figure that few had noticed, stirred. The keeper stepped forward, and Lee felt something ancient and vast touch the edges of his consciousness. Unlike the cold precision of Mindari contact, this felt warm, almost familiar. Morthok's scales rippled with surprise. The keepers rarely participated in council business, content to observe and record. Their race was older than any other inn. The galaxies so ancient that their origins were lost to legend. The keeper delegation abstains, the figure announced, its voice somehow reaching every mind in the chamber simultaneously. But we note for the record that memory has many layers, and some truths run deeper than current wisdom suggests. With the votes tallied, Morthok's pronouncement rang through the chamber like a death knell. The petition is denied. Humanity is granted observer status within the Galactic Council. You may attend sessions and offer input, but you have no voice. In our decisions, perhaps in a few more centuries, when your species has matured, we will reconsider. Lee felt the dismissal like a physical blow, but he maintained his composure. We thank the Council for this opportunity and accept your decision. As the session ended and delegates began to disperse, Lee noticed the keeper approaching. Up close, the ancient being seemed somehow familiar, though Lee was certain they had never met. Walk with me, Commander, the keeper said, its mental voice gentle but insistent. They moved away from the others, toward a viewing portal that looked out on the nebula surrounding Nexus Prime. Your people fought well in the past, the keeper said quietly. Some of us remember, even when others choose to forget. The galaxy may have need of warriors again soon. When that time comes, remember that wisdom and courage are not always found in the same hearts. Before Lee could respond, the keeper faded away like morning mist, leaving only the lingering sense that something profound had just occurred. As he rejoined his delegation for the journey back to Earth, Lee carried with him both the sting of rejection and the strange comfort of ancient words that hinted at deeper truths yet to be revealed. The research station. Prometheus hung in Titans, orbit, like a metallic spider, its sensor arrays, constantly scanning the orange moon's methane lakes below. Dr. Park Min-soo had been working for 72 hours straight, her eyes bloodshot from staring at holographic displays that flickered. With alien text and corrupted data files, the coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. What she had discovered in the deepest layers of the Galactic archive would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the cosmos. Her fingers trembled as she navigated through classified military records that should have been impossible to access. "Commander Lee, you need to see this," she called across the laboratory, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. The research facility was mostly empty at this hour, with only a skeleton crew monitoring the automated systems. Lee Daeho had been reviewing tactical reports in his quarters when her urgent message came through. He entered the lab still wearing his sleep clothes, his hair disheveled, but his eyes alert. "What's got you so worked up, Park?" "You've seen a ghost." "Worse," she whispered, pulling up a massive holographic display that filled the center of the room. "I found evidence of a war that never happened, or rather a war that did happen, but someone erased us from it." The hologram shimmered to life, showing star charts from 3 centuries past. Red markers indicated destroyed worlds entire systems consumed by something that defied conventional understanding. The scale of destruction was staggering, billions of lives lost. Civilizations that had stood for millennia reduced to cosmic dust. "The Void War," Park said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It started at the edge of the galaxy, where reality grows thin. Something came through entities that existed partially in our dimension and partially in something else entirely. The Council's historical records claim they defeated this threat through superior technology and unified strategy." Lee studied the display, his military mind immediately recognizing the tactical patterns. Those casualty figures. This wasn't a victory. This was a massacre. How did they actually win? Park's hand shook as she accessed another file. "They didn't. We did, humans. But every trace of our involvement has been systematically erased from official history." The hologram shifted, showing grainy combat footage that looked like it had been recorded through interference and dimensional distortion. Lee watched in stunned silence as primitive human spacecraft, barely more than armed cargo, haulers by galactic standards, engaged, creatures that seemed to phase in and out of existence. The enemy was unlike anything in the current xenobiology. Databases. They moved like living shadows, their forms constantly shifting between dimensions. Some appeared as writhing masses of dark energy, others as geometric impossibilities that hurt to look at directly. When they touched normal matter, it simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but completely removed from reality. "Watch this," Park said, highlighting a section of footage. A massive Zephyrian dreadnought, its plasma cannons firing at maximum output, engaged a void entity the size of a small moon. The energy beams passed through the creature without effect, like trying to shoot smoke. The entity flowed over the ship like liquid shadow, and within seconds, the dreadnought was gone. Not exploded, not damaged, simply no longer there. "Now look at this," she continued, switching to another recording. A human destroyer, its hull scarred and patched from previous battles, approached a similar entity. Instead of energy weapons, it launched a barrage of old-fashioned missiles and railgun rounds. The kinetic projectile slammed into the void creature, and it writhed in what could only be pain. Nuclear warheads detonated inside its form, tearing chunks away in brilliant flashes. Lee leaned closer to the display. Kinetic weapons worked when energy weapons didn't. But why? "I think it's because the void entities exist partially outside our reality," Park explained. "Energy weapons depend on electromagnetic forces, but kinetic weapons rely on basic physics: momentum, mass, simple cause, and effect. The creatures couldn't phase through something as fundamental as a chunk of metal moving at high speed." Footage continued, showing human Marines in primitive combat armor boarding what appeared to be a void vessel. The interior looked like a nightmare, corridors that bent in impossible directions, walls that seemed to breathe, and gravity that changed direction without warning. But the humans pressed forward, their projectile weapons cutting down shadowy defenders that the galaxy's finest warriors couldn't even touch. "There's more," Park said, her voice growing stronger with excitement. "Look at these psychological profiles. The advanced alien species, the Etherians, the Mindari, the Architects, they all share something in common. Their minds are highly ordered, logical, efficient. When they encountered void consciousness, it was like trying to mix oil and water. Their mental patterns couldn't adapt to something so chaotic and alien." She pulled up another file showing brain scans from the period, but humans. "Our minds are already chaotic. We think in contradictions. We feel with our thoughts. We make logical leaps that would crash an AI system. When human psychers encountered void entities, they could actually fight them on their own terms." A new voice interrupted their conversation. The official term was cognitive flexibility, though we always called it stubbornness. Lee spun around, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. A figure stepped out of the shadows near the lab's entrance, tall, robed, with features that seemed to shift in the dim light. It was the keeper from the council chambers, though Lee was certain the security systems should have detected any intruder. "Keeper Zelmer," the figure introduced. "Itself, I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but this conversation requires privacy. Your facility's monitoring systems are currently experiencing a minor malfunction." Park backed against her workstation. "How did you get aboard? This is a restricted facility." "I was there," Zelmer continued, ignoring her question. 300 years ago, when the void first tore through the galactic barrier, I watched the greatest civilizations in known space fall like grain before the scythe. The Etherian collective mind, a trillion-linked consciousness spanning dozens of worlds, shattered the moment it touched a void entity. The fragments are still screaming in the deep archives, if you know where to look. The keeper moved closer to the holographic display, and the images seemed to respond to his presence, becoming clearer and more detailed. The Zephyrian war fleets, with their plasma weapons that could crack planets, fired everything they had at the void. Their energy passed through the entities like light through glass. The Architects tried to trap them in gravity wells, but you cannot cage something that exists outside the normal flow of spacetime. Lee found his voice. "But the humans succeeded." "How?" "Because you were too primitive to fail," Zalmar replied. With what might have been amusement, every other species had spent millennia perfecting energy-based weapons, developing mental disciplines that emphasized order and control. When faced with entities that operated on pure chaos, they had no defense. The hologram shifted again, showing a human fleet commander directing a desperate last stand around Earth's moon. Lee recognized the tactical formation. A modified version was still taught at the academy, though its origins had been lost to history. Admiral Kim Jung-ho Zalmer said, reading Lee's expression, "Your predecessor, in a way." He realized that conventional tactics were useless and ordered all human forces to switch to kinetic weapons and close-range combat. The other species called it suicide. They were wrong. The footage showed human ships ramming void entities, their crews fighting, boarding actions in the twisted corridors of enemy vessels. It was brutal, chaotic warfare that violated every principle of civilized combat, and it worked. The turning point came at the Battle of Proxima Station, the Keeper continued. A human marine named Sergeant O. Menesio led a boarding party into the largest void vessel ever encountered. Her squad's mission was to plant a nuclear device in what passed for the creature's brain. The other species had tried similar attacks with energy weapons and exotic matter bombs. All failed. Park watched transfixed as the recording showed the sergeant and her team fighting through nightmare corridors, their assault rifles spitting tracer rounds at enemies that flickered between dimensions. What made the difference? She was terrified. Zalmer said simply, "Absolutely, completely terrified." And she used that fear as a weapon. The void entities fed on ordered thoughts, logical patterns they could predict and consume. But human emotions, raw, irrational, constantly changing, were like poison to them. Sergeant O's fear became rage. Her rage became determination, and her determination became something the Void had never encountered before. The hologram showed the final moments of the battle. Sergeant, wounded and running low on ammunition, stood face to face with a Void entity in what appeared to be the creature's control center. Instead of firing her weapon, she did something completely unexpected. She laughed. Not from madness, but from the sheer absurdity of a human marine from Earth confronting a being from outside reality itself. The entity recoiled as if struck. In that moment of confusion, O detonated her charges. The explosion tore through the creature's dimensional anchors, and the entire vessel imploded back into whatever hellish dimension it had come from. The war ended within months after that, Zalmer concluded. Once the Council species learned to copy human tactics, to embrace controlled chaos over rigid order, the Void retreat began. But acknowledging that primitive humans had saved galactic civilization was too much for their pride. Lee stared at the frozen image of Sergeant O, seeing his own determination reflected in her eyes across 3 centuries. So they erased us from history. It's not erased, forgotten. There is a difference. The Keeper's form began to fade slightly. Memory has layers, Commander. Truth has a way of surfacing when it is needed most. Park looked up from her workstation, her face pale. Keeper, why are you telling us this now? Why reveal the truth after all this time? Zalmer's voice carried a weight of ancient sorrow, because the deep space monitoring stations have detected familiar signatures at the galaxy's edge. The Void. Hunters are returning, and the Council has forgotten everything that saved them before. The holographic display flickered and died as the Keeper's presence faded completely. Lee and Park stood alone in the darkened laboratory, surrounded by the echoes of a war that never officially happened. It's holding knowledge that could change the fate of all known civilization. Outside the viewports, Titan's orange atmosphere swirled in eternal storms, while somewhere in the depths of space, ancient nightmares stirred once again. The warning came at 0347 hours. Terran Standard Time. Deep Space Monitoring Station Cerberus 7. Positioned at the very edge of the galaxy's spiral arm, transmitted its final message in a burst of static-filled terror before going completely silent. Chief Petty Officer Yim Junho was the first to see the readings, his coffee mug slipping from nerveless fingers as the impossible data scrolled across his screens. "Sir, you need to see this," he called to his watch commander, his voice cracking despite 10 years of military service. The readings showed space-time itself tearing apart like wet paper, creating wounds in reality that hurt to look at even. Through electronic sensors, within hours, similar reports flooded in from monitoring stations across the outer rim. The Kepler observation array detected massive gravitational anomalies. The Titan Deep Space Network recorded energy signatures. That violated known physics. But it was the crew of the merchant vessel New Busan who provided the first visual confirmation of what was coming through those tiers in space. Captain Lim Soo-jin had been running cargo between the outer colonies when her ship's proximity alarms screamed to life. Through the viewports of her aging freighter, she watched in horror as something impossible slithered out of a crack in reality itself. The entity defied description, part living shadow, part geometric nightmare, constantly shifting between dimensions like a snake shedding its skin. "This is merchant vessel New Busan," she transmitted on all emergency frequencies, her voice steady despite the terror that gripped her crew. "Unknown hostile contact at coordinates 77 Alpha. This thing, it's not from our reality. It's consuming the Helios mining platform. The entire station is just ... gone. Not destroyed. Gone." The transmission cut to static as the Void Hunter noticed the small freighter. Captain Lim's last act was to overload her ship's reactor, hoping the explosion might damage or at least slow the creature. The nuclear fireball illuminated the entity for a brief moment, revealing writhing tentacles of pure darkness that existed in more dimensions than human eyes could process. Then both ship and creature vanished into the twisted space around the dimensional rift on Earth. General Kim Taeman stood in the war room buried 500 meters beneath Seoul, watching as red indicators spread across the tactical display like a plague. Each fallen world represented millions of lives, entire civilizations that had taken millennia to build. now erased from existence in a matter of hours. The underground command center was humanity's most closely guarded secret, while the galaxy saw Earth as a backwater planet with primitive infrastructure. Beneath the surface lay the most advanced military installation in known space. Quantum computers processed battle data at speeds that would impress even the architects. Holographic displays showed real-time intelligence from thousands of hidden sensors scattered throughout the galaxy. Update from the Rigel sector. Lieutenant Colonel Han So-young reported, her fingers dancing across tactical keyboards as data streamed in from the front lines. The Mindari Collective attempted to establish a psychic barrier around their core. Worlds, the void entities, tore through their mental defenses like they weren't even there. 12 billion linked minds. Gone in under 6 minutes. Kim watched the tactical display with the cold calculation of a man who had prepared for this moment his entire career. Unlike the Council species, humanity had never forgotten the true threat that lurked beyond the galactic barrier. While other races pursued peaceful expansion and technological advancement, Earth's military had quietly prepared for the day when the nightmare would return. What about the Etherian response? He asked, though he already suspected the answer. Complete. Psychic breakdown, Han replied grimly. Their collective consciousness couldn't adapt to void thought patterns. The surviving fragments are broadcasting nothing but screams across subspace. The Council is calling it a temporary setback in mental coordination. A new alarm chimed as priority communications flooded the command center. Reports from across the galaxy painted the same picture, the most advanced civilizations in known space were falling like dominoes before an enemy they couldn't understand. Couldn't fight and couldn't escape. The Zephyrian Grand Fleet, pride of their warrior culture, had assembled every warship in their arsenal for a decisive battle at Kepler 442. 17 massive dreadnoughts, each capable of reducing a planet. 2 molten slag formed a battle line that stretched across half a solar system. Their plasma cannons charged to full power, ready to unleash the fury of artificial suns against the approaching void swarm. Sir, we're receiving battle footage from the Kepler engagement, reported communications specialist Park Juwon, face pale as she processed the incoming data. The Zephyrians opened fire with everything they had. Kim watched the holographic replay with growing dread. The massive Zephyrian warships unleashed a barrage that could have vaporized entire moons. Plasma beams lanced through space, each shot carrying enough energy to power a small star. The coordinated fire converged on the lead void entity, a creature the size of a small asteroid that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. The plasma passed through it like light through glass. No effect whatsoever, Han whispered, voicing what everyone in the command center was thinking. Their most powerful weapons can't even touch these things. The void entity responded by simply flowing over the nearest dreadnought. The massive warship, over 2 kilometers of armored hull and advanced technology, didn't explode or break apart. It simply stopped existing, erased from reality as if it had never been built. The remaining Zephyrian ships tried to retreat. But the void swarm moved faster than thought, consuming each vessel in turn. Within 15 minutes, the pride of Zephyrian military might was reduced to empty space and traumatized survivors floating. In escape pods, the few who lived to tell the tale spoke of watching their fellow warriors simply vanish, not killed, but removed from existence itself. Kim's secure communication system chimed with an incoming transmission bearing the Galactic Council's official seal. The message was formal, diplomatic, and utterly predictable in its condescension. Terran Command. The Galactic Council acknowledges the current extra-dimensional incursion and requests immediate logistical support for ongoing military operations. Human forces are authorized to provide supply lines, medical evacuation, and technical support to superior Council fleets engaged in primary combat operations. Your primitive weapons may prove useful in secondary roles, while advanced civilizations address the primary threat. The General's aide, Captain Oh-Seung-min, looked up from his communication console with barely concealed anger. They're still treating us like junior partners, even after watching their superior fleets get wiped out. Kim almost smiled at the galaxy's stubborn refusal to learn from history. For 3 centuries, the Council had convinced themselves that their technological superiority made them the natural leaders of galactic civilization. The idea that primitive humans might possess military capabilities they lacked was simply inconceivable to their ordered, logical minds. "Sir, how should we respond to the Council's request?" Han asked, pulling up diplomatic protocols on her workstation. Kim turned to the massive tactical display that dominated the command center's far wall. Hidden across the galaxy, marked only by subtle indicators that the Council had never noticed, were the signs of humanity's true military might. Underground shipyards on dead worlds, weapon caches in asteroid belts, tire fleets hiding in the dark spaces between stars. While the galaxy pursued peace and prosperity, humanity had prepared for war. "Send a response to the Council," Kim ordered, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of hidden preparation. "Tell them we acknowledge their request and are mobilizing our forces." "Get out of my head," she screamed, her mind blast tearing through the entity's consciousness like a psychic shotgun. The creature writhed in agony before dissolving into component shadows that fled back to whatever dimension had spawned them. "Target. Down!" she called out, wiping blood from her nose where the psychic backlash had hit her. These things really can't handle human creativity and stubbornness." The rescue operation continued throughout the station, with human Marines demonstrating tactics that had been forgotten by more civilized species. They used explosives to blast through corrupted bulkheads, employed flamethrowers to clear void infestations, and when all else failed, simply charged the enemy with nothing but determination and cold steel. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as humanity's hidden fleets emerged from the shadows. At the Battle of Rigel Station, Commander Park Esiogen ordered his destroyer to ram a void entity the size of a small moon, his ship's reinforced hull tearing through the creature's dimensional matrix like a bullet through paper. At Vega Prime, Marine Colonel Kim Men-young led a boarding action against a corrupted Council battleship, her troops fighting through corridors filled with possessed crew members and living nightmares. The Council species watched in stunned silence as their primitive allies demonstrated a level of aggressive warfare that they had forgotten was possible. Human ships didn't maintain elegant formations or fight according to established tactical doctrine. They swarmed their enemies like angry insects, using ramming attacks, boarding actions, and suicide runs to achieve victory at any cost. The Void Hunters, accustomed to defeating logical, predictable opponents, found themselves facing an enemy whose very irrationality was their greatest weapon. Where ordered minds could be consumed or driven mad, human chaos proved resistant to extra-dimensional influence. Where sophisticated technology failed, brutal simplicity succeeded, and for the first time in 300 years, the tide of battle began to turn against the entities from beyond reality itself. The rebuilt Council chambers on Nexus Prime gleamed with fresh crystal formations, their surfaces still bearing scorch marks from the void attack that had nearly destroyed the galactic capital 6 months earlier. The Great Hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from hundreds of species took their traditional positions. But everything had changed since the last gathering. General Kim Taemin walked slowly toward the central podium, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. His uniform was no longer the simple dress blues of Earth's military. Now it bore the combat ribbons of a dozen worlds, the honor marks of 5 different species, and most prominently, the golden star that marked him as Supreme Military Commander. Of all galactic defense forces, the alien delegates watched his approach with a mixture of respect and barely concealed fear. These were the same beings who had dismissed humanity as too primitive for full membership just months before. Now they hung on every word from the species that had saved them from extinction. High Chancellor Morthok rose from his throne, the massive reptilian scales having lost their golden luster. Where once they had shimmered with authority and pride, now they appeared dull bronze, the color of defeat and reluctant acknowledgement. The scars across his hide seemed deeper now, etched not just by ancient battles, but by the weight of being proven catastrophically wrong. Honored delegates, Morthok began, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. We gather today to formally recognize the events of the past 6 months, The Terran species has demonstrated capabilities that our previous assessments failed to anticipate. A ripple of discomfort passed through the assembly. The euphemism fooled no one. Their assessments had nearly doomed galactic civilization to extinction at the hands of entities they couldn't fight, couldn't understand, and couldn't defeat. The Void War has ended in victory, the Chancellor continued, each word seeming to cost him physical effort. This victory was achieved not through our advanced technology, not through our sophisticated weapon systems, but through methods we had deemed primitive. Kim stood at attention, his expression unreadable as he listened to the formal acknowledgement of humanity's role. Behind him, the human delegation had expanded dramatically. Dr. Park Min-soo now wore the elaborate robes of Chief Xena Historian, her research into forgotten history having become the foundation for new military doctrine. Admiral Ru Hyenwoo commanded the integrated fleet that now patrolled the galactic borders. Colonel Oh Seung-min directed the training programs that were reshaping alien military thinking across dozens of worlds. Therefore, Morthok announced, his voice echoing through the chamber, the Galactic Council hereby grants full membership to the Terran species, with all rights and privileges thereof. Furthermore, in recognition of their unique military capabilities, humanity is granted permanent leadership of all defensive operations throughout Council space. The applause was polite but subdued. Every delegate in the chamber knew they were witnessing the end of an era. For millennia, the most advanced civilizations had naturally assumed leadership roles based on technological superiority and cultural sophistication. That age was over. Kim stepped forward to accept the formal recognition, his movements controlled and precise. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had looked into the abyss and emerged victorious. Humanity accepts this responsibility, he began, his words reaching every corner of the vast chamber through translation matrices. But let me be clear about what this means. The old ways of thinking about warfare, about civilization, about what makes a species advanced, those assumptions are finished. He gestured to the holographic displays that materialized around the chamber, showing footage from the recent conflict. Images of human marines boarding void vessels, human ships ramming extra-dimensional entities, human psychers fighting alien consciousness in direct mental combat. For too long, this galaxy has equated sophistication with weakness, refinement with ineffectiveness. You built beautiful ships that couldn't harm your enemies. You developed perfect strategies that failed against chaos. You created ordered minds. That's shattered when confronted with true alien intelligence. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably as their greatest military failures were catalogued with clinical precision. Humanity succeeded where you failed because we never forgot a fundamental truth, Kim continued. In a universe filled with genuine monsters, sometimes the only effective response is controlled monstrosity in service of the greater good. Dr. Park Min-soo stepped forward, carrying a datapad that contained the new military protocols being implemented across Council space. Her voice was steady as she addressed the assembly. Human military academies are already under construction on 47 worlds, she announced. Every species will have the opportunity to learn what we term adaptive warfare, the art of fighting enemies that don't follow civilized rules of engagement. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. These same species had spent centuries refining their military doctrines, perfecting energy weapons, developing strategies based on mathematical models and logical analysis. Now they were begging to learn the chaotic, emotional, supposedly primitive, human approach to combat. Our first lesson is simple, Park continued. Survival doesn't care about your technological achievements. Evolution doesn't respect your cultural sophistication. When faced with extinction, the only morality that matters is winning. Admiral Ru moved to another display showing the current disposition of forces across the galaxy. Where once Council fleets had operated according to species-specific doctrines. Now integrated battle groups combined alien technology with human tactics. The new Galactic Defense Force operates on principles that may seem alien to your ordered minds, he explained. We embrace chaos as a weapon. We use unpredictability as armor. We turn our supposed weaknesses, emotion, irrationality, stubbornness, into tactical advantages. The display showed human-designed ships alongside alien vessels, but even the alien craft had been modified according to human specifications. Sleek Zephyrian cruisers now carried kinetic weapons alongside their plasma cannons. Etherian vessels had been hardened against psychic attack. Even the ancient architect ships mounted crude but effective projectile systems. Colonel O stepped up to present the training statistics. In the past 6 months, we've retrained over 2 million alien military personnel in human combat doctrines. The results speak for themselves. Combat footage filled the display, Zephyrian pilots executing ramming attacks that would have horrified their ancestors, Minduri troops conducting boarding actions with projectile weapons, Etherian psychers learning to fight with emotion rather than pure logic. The most difficult lesson, O continued, has been teaching your species to embrace calculated brutality. You've spent so long trying to be civilized that you forgot how to be effective. Kim returned to the center of the chamber as the presentations concluded. His final words would reshape galactic society for generations to come. Understand this clearly, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Humanity didn't save you through superior technology or advanced tactics. We saved you because we never forgot what it means to be predators, he maintained. Our connection to the violence that created us, refined it, controlled it, and used it to protect what we value most. He gestured toward the great windows that looked out on the star-filled void beyond, out there in the darkness between galaxies. Other threats are waiting. Entities we can't imagine, challenges we haven't anticipated, enemies that will test everything we think we know about warfare and survival. The chamber remained silent as his words sank in. Every delegate understood that they were witnessing the birth of a new galactic order. One built not on technological advancement or cultural achievement, but on the simple ability to do whatever was necessary to protect their worlds. The galaxy is under new management, Kim concluded. Humanity stands watch, and we will be ready. As the session ended and delegates began to disperse, the transformation was already visible. Alien military officers clustered around human advisors, eager to learn tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Species that had never cooperated before now worked together under human leadership, united by the shared recognition that survival trumped all other considerations in the depths of space. Human patrol fleets continued their vigilant rounds. Their crews scanned the void with instruments designed to detect dimensional anomalies, ready to face whatever new horrors might emerge from the spaces between realities. They carried weapons that other species had deemed too primitive, too brutal, too effective for civilized use. The final transmission of the day went out to every world in Council space, broadcast on all frequencies in every known language. This is Galactic Defense Command. Humanity stands watch. The galaxy is defended. All threats will be met with overwhelming force and absolute determination. We are the sword and shield of civilization, the guardians who embrace darkness so that others may live in light. In military academies across hundreds of worlds, alien cadets learn to think like humans, chaotic, emotional, stubborn, and utterly relentless in defense of what they considered sacred. They practiced boarding actions, ramming attacks, and suicide runs. They learned to use fear as a weapon and anger as fuel. The galaxy had finally remembered a truth it had tried for centuries to forget. Sometimes the most sophisticated response to an existential threat was the simple application of human determination and a well-placed explosive charge. And in the endless night between the stars, humanity's children stood ready to prove that lesson again and again, for as long as the universe dared to test them. The end.